hotel, get my bag, and get off to the airport. So
Okay.
I'll be. In fact, you know what I might even do just to be kind to myself. I'm going to set an alarm that will give me a 5-minute warning.
Okay, and you know, since it's just the two of us, if you want to end early, that's okay
Yeah.
too.
Well, yeah, we'll end
it.
when the conversation dies off. We probably go pretty quickly if we're. Edit.
And then we can decide to butterfly or bee.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think it'd be a useful conversation to so I'll set it at 1:53. That gives me a 7-minute warning. And if that works. So
Okay.
I set aside this little bit for an agenda of, you know, why do we want to bring other professions in? I think that we need to understand that. And then sort of things that I thought might make sense for us to do as a mind map is sort of who and what might we need, you know, what kind of things are we looking to add to our community
Right.
that are coming from these other professions. And then we can talk about how we outreach to them, you know, how do we get to them. So.
Quick, are you going to be using that chair?
No, you want to use that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't care. I'll stand. I'll be sitting on an airplane soon, so standing will be good.
Yeah, okay.
So, the reason why I think it would be beneficial. So, before the Agile Coach Camp in Columbus, we had a games day that we did for that, and we had two people that were totally outside from the community of Agile software development. We had a gal that was a sociologist, had a PhD in it. She had done work in Africa, you know, helping communities and stuff out. And she'd come up with this game that she called NetMap. And essentially it's sort of what you call, also here sometimes called influence maps, right? And she used pawns and disks and lines on flip chart paper to build out a network of understanding. And again, it was sort of a facilitated game because you could play what if scenarios and things like that, you know. So in that way, it's sort of like a social network simulation. Another gal was from the education background. I think at the time she was a kindergarten teacher. And she brought a lot of, you know, different learning techniques and stuff like that, which you don't get, I think, when you just talk to, you know, us in the software development community, unless you're actually getting deeply into studying that. And a lot of what what Doc's presentation dealt with and what Derek Wade's had some psychology elements into it. So we need to think a little bit about, hey, do we need psychologists? And there may be other types of professions that I think could add stuff in. One I can think of that we don't attract is game designers. People that actually do that for a living, whether they do it for video games or board games, right? I think board games would probably fit us better, but that might be my bias from the board game community. But that's you know, I do think there's some benefit to getting them participating, and they may find new ways of constructing board games quickly, or you know, techniques that they might want to use, and those kinds of things. So. So that's my reason why. I don't know, was there any particular reason why you thought?
Yeah. So a couple of things. So let's make an assumption that we're going to leave outside subject matter experts out of this, because that's just too obvious. That if you're developing software for a certain audience, you want people from that audience there. That's just kind of obvious.
Yep.
Nobody needs buy-in on that.
Right.
Where I'm coming from is, I believe very strongly in having a diversity of opinions and backgrounds and beliefs. And the more you have those, the safer you are, the fewer things you're going to find out later, and the more open you're going to be to different solutions. So even if you have you know, UI experts that are telling you, you know, the software needs to work this way, or usability experts that are telling you, no, you can't make that green and the other one red, or things like that. There's going to be other people with different backgrounds that think in very different ways. I'm trying to remember the name of a book. there was this really good book that talked about how designs failed because they didn't take into account, the name will come to me by the time
That's
I'm
okay.
done with the paragraph or two. Talks about how failure of design of certain things. So like one example is, and it's still fraught today, doorknobs, door handles, indicating whether something is a push or a pull.
Right.
Now, if you're a thinking person that thinks about these things, you know that in any office building, doors entering a room are gonna open out for safety reasons. But not everybody thinks about that. They see a door handle, and you've got these bars that come out, and sometimes they're a push and sometimes they're a pull. So I think having people from different positions thinking about different ways, like one of the things that, one company that I work with, called Aptima, they have a very interesting business model. All they do is SBIR contracts, small business investment.
Yep, I'm very
research.
familiar with them.
Okay.
I ran
So-
one actually for a while.
Okay, great. So most of the work is like DOD or NASA, Department of Transportation, stuff like
Yep.
that. And we had this interesting one, knowledge capturing and sharing for shipbuilders. So shipbuilders used to be this generational industry where, you were a shipbuilder because your father's a shipbuilder, and that's how you learned shipbuilding, as you hung out with them, and you learned that. Well, that's not happening anymore.
Right.
So you both have a removal of the normal way that the knowledge gets transferred, and you have a bunch of people that are really not computer literate enough to, shipbuilders are technically not computer wizards.
Right.
So coming up with ways of solving that audience, and you wouldn't be able to do that if you didn't have people outside of the software community. So by necessity, this company, Aptima, has just about as many scientists in different fields as they had software engineers. So they have cognitive scientists, they have scientists that are excellent in modeling, natural language processing experts and stuff like that. And I worked on all these different projects that, without joining together with people from those other fields, we might have been able to do something, but it definitely wouldn't have suited the needs as well. And it's not just a matter of like professions, but also culturally different. Like in my last job, they asked me, we have a lot of people from India and China and everything here. Are you going to be okay working with those kind of people? And I said, I grew up in New York, and that's all I had to say. They understood that I'm used to growing up in that culture. But not every culture is like that. You can't assume that if you're going to get a job, somewhere in the Midwest or something like that, that they've seen a lot of even Jews, let alone blacks or
Right.
And it leads to thinking in different pathways even within the software community.
So I think I heard 3 whys. So I've sort of brought in that we want some expertise.
Right. Above and beyond the expertise of
Right.
like the subject matter expert. or
Right,
what you're trying to
exactly.
build.
Right, so we want expert, help in certain, not because of the software we're building, but because of the games we're designing and making sure that they help people get to the understanding we're looking for.
Right.
Some of the obvious ones that would be like graphic designers or something like that, obviously, but, the less obvious ones are like psychologists and cognitive science and those kinds of things. Then we also heard diversity of opinion. Right, which is always a good thing.
Right.
Different viewpoints. And then this last one is the cultural aspects that these different communities may bring. If I get somebody from an education background, they're probably likely to have seen different cultural behaviors occurring, especially with even at a young age that we don't see necessarily.
Right.
So
let me throw out one thing that maybe expands on this a little, or another reason of why for those whys,
Okay.
if you will. So one of the things about the nature of games is that you're trying to take some kind of, most of the time, some real world process and boil it down to its essence. That also means that you have a couple of minutes to explain how the game is supposed to work.
Right.
And you need people that can learn to do that, to boil it down in a way that cross-culturally everybody's going to understand when
Right.
you say, what
So,
you're saying.
well, that's pretty good. That's really good. So you're taking the expertise, all three of these elements.
Exactly.
And it's, the thing is boiled to the essence of what the game is.
Boil to the essence, but not beyond the essence.
Right.
You have to have enough there that you can quickly explain how the game is supposed to work.
But not boiled away.
Right. Yeah, there you go.
Right? As Antoine Saint-Exupéry said, perfection is achieved by not how much you can add, but when you have taken away enough so that the story is good. So
Right.
great. So let's think about this combination question of who we might think we want and what might we want them to bring to the table, so that that we need from them. And
Right.
so the obvious one, in my opinion, that I haven't met in anything dealing with Agile games, whether it be into like an online community, like Tasty Cupcakes or something like that, or innovation games even, or whether it be here at this conference or the Agile games we had before Coach Camp that time, we didn't have any game designers that do this for a profession. So that's one. So that's one part of the mind map.
I'm not running away, I'm just seeing if that's on cam.
Okay, and then I think psychologists or anything dealing with psychologists. That's it. Cognitive science. Scientists, whatever that might be, would be another one. Another one, sociologists, because especially if you're dealing with things so this would be, how the mind works. This is sort of like how people interact with each other, right? I think that would be an excellent one. Educators,
Yes.
right? That would be another one that would really be good, because if we are trying to do a learning point for the game, they help remind us, hey, you said this was the learning objective. Your design is taking you off on a different path. You're not going to get to your learning objective, or it's too much noise, or whatever it is.
Right.
So they would bring something to bear. I think people that are into visual design would be helpful. All right.
So a lot of this has to do with the mechanics of the game and the human interface to the game. So thinking in a different direction
Sure.
more about how you develop the ideas for the game before you figure out how you're going to do it. I would say people like artists who are used to creating something from nothing and knowing how to start the process. So one of the lessons that I learned in my life from my wife's mother, who I've never met, but one of the lessons that she taught my wife that I learned from her is she said she was a great painter. She painted all sorts of great stuff, and they would go on these fabulous vacations, and she would go there and paint what she saw there. She said one of the hardest things about learning to paint is knowing when to stop painting. And learning to do software development, learning to develop the games, things like that. You have to know when you're done, and you can't have, I guess you could have unit tests for a game, but knowing how to create something from nothing and knowing when you're done is good. I would think people who write book authors, as far as some games are more. I don't know if storytelling is the right word, but things occur over time.
Yeah, I think storytelling is a key element.
Yeah.
If you're playing a game that has many for doing iterations or whatever, it has a time period to it, it should tell a storyline, right? And there are games specifically that do that are nothing but storytelling games, but game designers may have that, but writers would also help guide you. What's the story that you wanted to tell, right? As opposed to, most storytelling games, the path can go any direction. You may have a very specific story you want it to tell, right?
Right. So if you see some of these games that have been incubated here, you could see that some of them have a great concept and they've come up with the mechanics, but there's kind of no way to end it, or maybe there's no goal, and maybe having somebody involved in the process that was used to spelling out a timeline and then filling in the middle of it might have helped with that.
All right. Yeah, because both of these start with nothing.
Exactly.
Except a simple idea, perhaps. These guys usually start with somebody else planting a seed of an idea.
Mhm.
These folks, I think, look at things that emerge, same way with sociologists.
Mhm.
Educators usually have a goal in mind, so they're sort of like designers in that regard. And same way with game designers, right? They've got, hey, I've got an idea. So in game designers, sometimes it's a theme that drives it. There's a game designer named Richard Breeze, and I have one of his games called Reef Encounter, and it's about how coral battle one another. And he got the inspiration from watching a television program about coral reefs.
Oh, nice.
Other ones start out and they figure out cool mechanics that work together, and they slap a theme onto it,
Right.
just to make it feel a little bit more rather than just something abstract.
Interesting.
So, they approach it from different ways depending on what inspired them.
Right.
Which is a little bit more like this, but not quite. It's like a cross in between these two to some degree.
Right. So I'm not good at single tasking, so I just remember the name of that book.
Okay, cool.
The Psychology of Everyday Things. So jumping back to what you were just talking about, so I love computer games. Most of the computer games that I like playing are more puzzle-like.
Mhm.
So one of my favorites is Portal.
Okay.
And it's an interesting story along what you're talking about, because Portal is like, hey, we just came up with this really cool gravity engine. And then somebody else said, a real-world simulator that had excellent gravity, and it understood physics.